Hello there, I am Man in Yellow and welcome back to another high rank game review video. I will probably be doing a bunch of these since the season just reset, and that means that I am not getting any good arena games for a little while. That's just how the reset in Phobies works. So I'm gonna be facing people who are usually way under leveled, and that's just not fun watching. So instead of that, I will be doing these high rank game reviews, and there are a decent amount of them because everyone was like at their highest rank a week ago, or at high ranks a week ago, I would say, because, well, it's right before the season ends, so that's when everyone is like as high rank as they're gonna be, which means there are a lot more replays of good players against good players. This one I chose to do the replay for because it has Billy in it, and I really want some like videos on some of these nerfed phobies to showcase that they are still usable, and some of them are even still very good. Billy in particular is a very strong phobie still. It works really well with buffers and also on maps with stim pads, and you will see all of those things here. I would also say that the other phobies are still perfectly usable. Dr. Holiday is a lot more niche. Now it's kind of like a heartbreaker, but a bit better. But Phantom is still very powerful, and the shovel is still very powerful too. So you definitely shouldn't just like completely ignore those phobies because they got nerfed, because they are all still very good phobies that you should be using in a lot of situations. Here we will see the Billy from NuclrarDeath, and we will actually see it already on their second turn. And that is what you often want to do with Billy. The reason why you want Billy out so early is because Billy is extremely good at poking the opponent, and that is even better for you when the opponent does not have enough damage to threaten it, which means during the early game, that is just the great spot for Billy. Like, if the opponent only has one or two phobies, there's no way that they are going to one-shot Billy, which means you can just stand a bit out of their range, move in, hit them, and move out again over and over again to get free damage, which is extremely annoying to deal with, and it's also just very powerful. If you take like one or two hits at enemies for free, and then you fight after that, it becomes very easy to one-hit enemies when you bring a buffer with the Billy. So that is a very strong thing. I will also mention, we saw that the Razor Mouth was placed here despite Snowball being in the middle. That is pretty interesting, because like chiducS could have hit it, but the Razor Mouth would probably just take the middle point anyway, so there's no real point to that for chiducS, which means you can actually place it further into the map and have more room for your cassowary. That is something you only really realize when you played the game for a little bit, because some people would not place their Razor Mouth out here because they would be afraid of it taking free damage from the snowball. You could also make an argument to not place it out there if you want the Razor Mouth for fighting rather than just taking points, which some people maybe would. Here we just see some panic points being captured, and then the Billy will come out. And you can see what I mean here with like it being dangerous for poke. Obviously this Razor Mouth is going to die and it's going to be replaced by the Cowbell. Cowbell is going to die and so on. But after that, the Billy is free to go in and hit this Jins thing if it stays here, and then immediately jump back again out of range, which is very scary to deal with, and means that chiducS has to try and find a response to this. They can't just sit back and do nothing, because they're going to take a bunch of free hits, and then they're going to get overwhelmed very easily by the opponent, and risk having their team essentially be one-shot because they are all lower health than they should be. So they are kind of in a position now where they really want to find an answer to this Billy, because otherwise they're just going to get poked out of the game. The answer they come up with here is very bad, in my opinion. That's not what you should be doing against Billy, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. First of all, we're just going to see exactly what I described happening. You could very easily figure out that is what would be happening here. And then we see a Shovel, also still a good phobie, but this is a bad use case for Shovel we are going to be seeing in a little bit. Definitely not what you want to do with it. Then we just see a Gravedigger, which is just for utility here, and the Cupcake, which I talked about a little bit already. With Billy, you really want buffers, and that is because buffers work really well with this quick draw. If you get a buff on it with this, and you get to move forward and double hit, that is a ton of damage. You have to consider that because Billy has one extra action, that is essentially the same as you having a 50% AoE phobie such as Klepto hit 2 additional targets with the AoE. That would be the same amount of damage, but you're dealing it to one phobie, which is often better because you actually get to kill things. So those work really well together. It also means that walking up to this Billy without being able to one-shot it becomes pretty much like impossible to do without just losing the game outright. Because without the Cupcake, this is already doing what, like 1300 damage to you with just a lot of hits if you walk into it. But with this, that damage is more than doubled. That is an insane amount of damage. Like, that's 2600 damage from one phobie just hitting you, and of course a buffer being spent. But that is still very scary. That will one-hit most things. And of course, this is at this level. It would be different if it was level 1, but I'm just using these 2 level 18s. I think this is actually slightly higher level, right? Yeah, it is. But both of these work really well together, is just what I'm trying to say. You can do the exact same thing with Gonzo Bonzo, just a little bit less buff, but still very good. Cupcake is used a lot more than Gonzo if you have both, but most people don't have Cupcake. Now we see the bad answer that I was talking about. See a Foul come in here. Foul is just not a good answer to really anything. Foul is a pretty bad phobie in my opinion. Doesn't really have a super good spot in the game, but it works really like badly as a counter to big phobies, which is what a lot of people try and use it for. They use Foul to counter something like Billy or Boss or something like that, Beauty, whatever, and it does not work very well. The reason for that is people are using it for this funky chicken ability, which diseases the opponent, obviously, and then they are hoping that the disease will just take care of the scary enemy phobie for them, and that would be a 7 key for a 7 key trait in theory. However, the problem with this is disease takes a really long time to actually kill something. So this disease will go onto the Billy, and the Billy will kill the Foul, and then it will have 1 or 2, maybe even 3 more turns after that where it can act and do damage to the opponent. You could even use something like a Boolean to just like extend that duration for a very long time, so the Foul doesn't really end up with like actually killing off that enemy phobie, and you just like have the same problem for several turns after with the Billy. So does not work very well against this. Also doesn't work well against Boss or Beauty or any of those other large phobies in my opinion. That is just not what you want against those. So I think this is a very bad counter. What I think you should do against Billy, because I can't just say this is a bad counter and then just leave it at that. That would be weird to do. What I think they should have done is they should have brought multiple efficient attackers. So stuff like the Ginsting, Hematic Ginsting, Daisy, whatever. And then they should quickly bring a Miss Muffet. So instead of bringing Shovel into the Foul with a 1 key, I think they should have gone straight up for a Hematic Ginsting, moved this down, and then the turn after they put a Billy out here. What that would do is it makes it so this Billy can't just sit here, because you would walk up with your Miss Muffet, pull it in, hit it with both of these, like the what's it called, the Ginsting and the Hematic Ginsting, and then you would snowball it and it would probably die. It would also further into the match, you could place your Miss Muffet a bit more aggressively further in, and you could try and do the same kind of thing, and you would have the extra range from the pull and stuff like that. Miss Muffet is what I often use to counter Billy, or at least used to use, because I don't see a lot of Billy anymore. But I think that is just the best way of dealing with it. You bring a pull phobie, and then you try to kill it in one turn. This could also be other pull phobies. Miss Muffet is actually not the best against it most of the time. I think Octonaughty is a bit better against Billy. And the reason for that is because if a Billy has a buffer behind, which it very often does, such as the Cupcake or Gonzo Bonzo, you risk your Miss Muffet just dying in one hit or not being able to stand in a good position because it would die in one hit. And Octonaughty is a little bit tankier, and it has Dimensional Death Rattle or Death Effect, which means that if the opponent walks up and kills it, they will be pulled in and you can at least get some damage and can do return fire and stuff like that. So I think in general, Octonaughty can also be very good against it, but you just want to pull it in and kill it is essentially what I'm getting at. That is the best way of dealing with a Billy. On small maps you can also go for something like Oopsie Baby against it and try and debuff it and just hit it a bunch. Oopsie Baby is a very good counter to specific large enemy phobies, but that is like another discussion. What I'm getting at here is they should have gone for some kind of plan where they try and actually kill the Billy, rather than going for like this weird like I'm gonna foul and walk in here and place a disease on it and kill it over 3 or 4 turns. That's just not gonna work out well for you, as we will also see here. Gravedigger is just being used to open up the stim pad a bit more, which is fine, I guess. Gravedigger has a lot of utility on this map. You can lock the opponent out, you can break these blocks up here. There's a decent amount of good things you can do with it. You're rarely ever sad about having a Gravedigger on your board. You can also block enemies out and stuff like that. It's just very nice to have. Also opens up Hard Rush on this map a lot, because you can place the Gravedigger here, put a block here, have ranged phobies just hitting the heart, and the opponent can't destroy the block with anything but attacks. Bad thing about that is they can AoE on it, and they can also hit you from over here, but it opens up some like aggressive paths. Other than that, we have the Radiator coming in. This is another phobia that works extremely well with buffers such as Cupcake or Gonzo Bonzo, because you get to have AoE attacks and you have the passive, which means you can double dip on it to deal a ton of damage. This is actually also another phobia that you can still use with Phantom and do really crazy things. You put this in the middle of the opponent's team with your Phantom, then you double hit with the Radiator and get the end of turn effect. Maybe you have a buff on it and you just one-shot multiple enemy phobies. Can be very strong, because this is not with a cooldown, so Phantom won't log it. That can work pretty well too. But that was just like another side discussion, I guess. It's very good here, because if the opponent walks in, which is what they're setting up to do, then you're gonna get to do multiple AoE attacks on them. And now we will see exactly what I was saying. The foul is just going to die, and it will decease the Billy, but the Billy will be alive for several turns, where it can do more damage to the opponent. We also see a Ray behind here just to deal with the Radiator. Personally, I think they should have gone like Cassowary Murderwing or something. But even here, like, as soon as you go in with the foul here, it feels like the game is over to me. Because you are going to be down a lot of keys. You're losing the Ginsting, you're losing the foul, even the Electrocat is dying. And the Billy is still alive for another like couple turns, especially because it also got healed, so it's actually full health right now. Which means this disease is going to take 4 turns in theory to kill it. It's probably gonna be 2 or 3 when you look at it like that, because it will take some damage, right, when it fights. But the point is just that it gets to attack again. It's still active on the board even after getting diseased, and that in general is the problem with disease phobies. The only disease phobies that are really good are the ones that do it in big AoEs so that it hits the entire enemy team, because that's just a huge effect then. But the single target ones don't really do very well in the game in general. Also, I should mention this, I don't know if I would have placed the Radiator there. I would probably have put it up here and just let the Electrocat live, because then it would be a lot harder for the opponent to kill it. They would probably still be able to do it, but they would be forced to walk into you, and then you can do a lot more damage with the Billy and stuff. But that's a small thing here, because at this point the game is pretty much over, and letting them kill the Radiator is not even that bad, because it means that the Ray charges and is stuck in place, so that makes it very easy to kill it. But yeah, I would have probably have done something slightly differently. But at the end of the day, it's still a good play here. And we see the Ray Chargers obviously die here, because it was forced to double hit. Which means it's just very easy to kill. Also, you even saw Billy go in here and hit once more. which gave you enough damage. So it's already still doing something. And we have a Bonzo coming out from behind to buff it. Which means next turn this can in theory walk in, double hit you for a very large amount of damage. And the Bonzo is also just good. Works well with the Hematic. You can bring a Klepto if you want to, or you can bring your own Noxious for some AoE. There's just a lot of good things that can still go on. Now chiducS does another very stupid thing. They are behind on the board and they decide to bang to take keys. That's just not something you can do. I've seen multiple players do this, even at very high ranks. You can't do that. You're just going to die. Or you're going way too slow. There's not even any point in banking that much, because if you are behind on the board and you have this few phobies and you go for something large, you're going to lose that game against any even semi-competent player, because it makes it very easy to counter you. You're playing extremely slow. Like, there's just no upside to it. I believe they go Blast-O-Matic here, which is just like, that is extremely slow. You also see the double movement to kill the snowball here, which means we are getting another 3 keys out of this deceased Billy that traded for a foul. That is a very good deal. And then we just see some decent attackers come in here. These are the kind of phobies that probably should have been brought by chiducS earlier in the game. Probably even on last turn they could have brought something like a Daisy in here. That might have helped them a little bit. Instead we see the Blast-O-Matic and a non-combat phobie. So right now chiducS has 2 combat phobies on the board. These 2 are the only ones that are really made to fight. The shovel can also fight a little bit, but it's mainly a support phobie. And this is a dedicated support phobie. So they now have 2 fighting phobies, whereas NuclrarDeath has 1, 2, 3. This is like kind of the same as Little Shovel, and they can bring another phobie that will counter these, or they can even bring 2 phobies that can counter these. I believe they bring Thunder Rocks and something else, or they just take the points with a Droney, because chiducS also has no fast phobies, so they can't even respond to this. Which means you can just hard rush them. But yeah, you can just bring multiple small phobies and that counters the big phobie really well. In general, that is a thing for big phobies. If you bring them very late in the game, after fighting when you have no team, they are extremely easy to counter, and they are not even that good, because they will just lose in terms of power to a lot of smaller phobies. Like a mass of small phobies are more powerful than one large phobie in most combat scenarios. You only really bring large phobies when you already have a team down and you want something huge as your last or second last phobie. That is when you should bring something big, and it can be really, really powerful to do so. But outside of that, you shouldn't be doing it. Most of the time, at least. And you can see here, the game is already over. This Blast-O-Matic is dead, and even if the Blast-O-Matic isn't dead, NuclrarDeath has every panic point on the board, and they're sitting near the opponent's heart, which is at half health. Below half health, because it takes damage here. So they are going to either lose their Blast-O-Matic or they're going to lose the game. And the game was already over for several turns ago, and this is just like the last part of it. I just wanted to mention the thing with the big phobie, because that is something that frustrates me to see when like very high ranked players still do it. It's like, why are you still doing that kind of mistake at that high of a rank, and after playing the game for so long? Makes no sense. But the main takeaway from this game was just Billy is still pretty damn good, and it works really well with buffers still. It also worked well with buffers before. Before it was just like generally really strong even without buffers. Now it's kind of like, it's not that great without buffers, but when you use it with buffers, it's still very powerful. So you definitely just want to bring it with like Bonzo or Cupcake or both, like you saw here. Most of the time you will probably only need one of those buffers, but you could also do both like we saw in this game. And that is pretty much everything for this one. You can see the hardest death, and we got to see the, what's it called, Billy do really well. We also saw Radiator deal a lot of damage, and everything else is essentially just support phobies, and then Asthmatic, which is a good generic fighting phobie, so that is also very strong. On the opponent's side, we saw some phobies that really didn't make that much sense. We saw a Foul with a Le Shovel combo that makes no sense to do. And then we saw Ray Charges when really they probably should have gone for multiple phobies at that point in the game, because one big thing wasn't really gonna cut it. And we saw the Big Bang, which obviously just made no sense on that specific turn. But yeah, the main takeaway was just the Billy that I wanted to showcase, because I'm not seeing any Billies. It has pretty much disappeared from like my matches, and it really shouldn't be, because it's still pretty damn good. A lot of people are looking at it now and they're going, oh, it costs 1 key more and it's 1400 health. That is so much weaker. That's the same health as Oopsie Baby, which also costs 7 keys. And Oopsie Baby is not mobile, and they are both capable of poking. Like, it is a very good phobie still. It's around the same power level as Oopsie Baby, and Oopsie Baby is very good. So, still a viable phobie, you should be using it. It's just the takeaway from this. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.